Hello and welcome to The Road Less Taken, the weekly web series from Nexus Consulting, where we are in conversation with people who've made unconventional career choices and excelled at them. My name is Venki Srinivasan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nexus Consulting. And today I'm going to be in conversation with a very special guest, someone who can be described with the term 3M. She's an accomplished Carnatic musician, having given hundreds of concerts and represents the voice of the new generation of Carnatic musicians. She is a management professional with a degree from IIM Bangalore, and she is the museum director of the Indian Music Experience Museum, India's first interactive music museum based here in Bengaluru. So, ladies and gentlemen, for this episode of TRLT, please welcome our guest, Manasi Prasad. Hi, Manasi. Welcome and thank you for being a guest on TRLT.
Hi, Venki. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, I'm going to start by rewinding a little bit and asking you what is your earliest memory of music?
My earliest memories really are of myself being like a small kid on my mother's lap while she's taking music class, while she's taking Pata class for all these people of different ages. There are kids trooping in, then there's one auntie who's like 75. So there are all these different people who come and go, and the only thing common is that they sing.
Right.
So in my mind, I thought to be human is to sing. Like everybody sings. It's a very normal thing. So I thought, okay, I got to sing too. And those are some of my earliest memories. So quite early, maybe when I was like 2 or 3 years old, and then there's this recording that we have. We used to live in the Gulf, in Kuwait at that time. And we had this expatriate community, which sometimes I feel gave me more opportunities to sort of perform and be on stage than one would have perhaps had here. I was about 2.5 or 3 years old, and there was this get together and everybody's singing, and then my mother tells me to sing some shloka or something. It was M.S. Subbulakshmi's Ganesha Pancharatnam. Udakaratam modakam sada vimukti sadhakam. So I'm singing it in whatever way I can, and then I turn to my mother and I say, I want Shruti. I wanted her to switch on the Shruti box because
quite the
that's a grown up
performer you were.
Absolutely, because you got to have the works.
Right.
At that stage, I think the excitement was more about the performance and everybody clapping for you and all that.
So you've then, from that age of 2.5, 3, over all these years, you've done thousands of shows across every continent on planet Earth in I don't know how many countries and so on. So what is that mental state just before you have to go out there and perform?
The interesting thing is, especially because I sing classical music, a lot of the emphasis really is on spontaneity and improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're singing the same raga 1,000 times, each time you're giving something new to it, or you're trying to explore it a little differently.
But while staying within the kind of construct of it.
Right? Absolutely. So let me give you an example. We'll take any ragam, a simple one, like say Hindolam. Sa ga ma da ni sa ni da ma ga sa. And on one hand, it's like doing permutations and combinations, like we learn in maths, right? Like sa ga sa ma ga da ma ni da sa ni sa could be one, or sa ma ga da ma ni da sa ni ga sa 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 ma ga sa ni da sa ni da ma ni da ma sa ma ga da ma ni da ma sa ni da ga sa ni sa ma ga ni ga sa da sa ni ma ni da sa ga ma da ni sa. So you can go on making patterns. And
that was terrific, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can also change the mood with what you sing. For example, a raga like Hindola, especially in the North Indian context, people revel in it as a very serious raga. So you can sing it in a very sedate and in the lower octaves, or you can make it very bright. Samani gamaja sudhamaya gana vichakshana gunashila dayalamala balaya samajavara gamana. So there are many different ways that you can approach the same raga, the same composition, and find something new.
Right.
So each performance to me is a test in some way. It's exploring something new. And especially being in classical music, there's something that we revere about the art form.
Mm.
And I might have done like several hundred or thousand concerts, but you approach it with a certain reverence.
Right.
And that today may I be blessed to
Mm.
present whatever I know,
Mhm.
and a little butterflies in the stomach. Yes, of
Right,
course.
right,
Yeah.
right. I just want to, latch on to one interesting point you made there about the whole reverence and how this whole art form is kind of really revered and on a high pedestal and governed by a really kind of closed, constrained system, so to say, in the way it should be performed and delivered. But we're also seeing some change happen in that, right? And you and several others are kind of part of this change of making this more inclusive, if I might call it that. So,
Yeah. So I think this question of inclusivity and expanding the boundaries, if I may use so grandiose a word, these are very personal things.
mhm,
It depends on what your views are. Are you conservative or are you
mhm,
liberal? Are
mhm,
you a traditionalist or do you look more for innovation? So, in my mind, for me, the question is always, how do I make this more relevant to the audience I'm singing? And
right,
I allow whatever I do to kind of stem from that. Now,
right,
that relevance I can manifest in different ways. For
sure.
example, if sometimes the relevance is through the lyric.
Mm,
When I'm singing Nidhi Chala Sukhama Ramuni Sannidhi Seve Sukhama. So the lyric is asking, do you have more happiness in Nidhi or in Sannidhi?
mhm,
Now, Tyagaraja is singing that out of his love for Rama or something like that.
sure.
But in my mind, I interpret it as, would you, go after something that is monetarily rewarding, or would
Mm,
you do something which you're passionate about?
emotionally
So that's
fulfilled.
the way I would, approach that
Very
lyric.
interesting.
The other way of relating to it, which a lot of people are against, and some people are for, is the question of the instruments that we use, right?
Right.
Because in a traditional Carnatic concert, of course, you use the violin and the mridangam and whatever. But when you come into the more sort of, I don't know, contemporary space, then you come into the fusion area where, of course,
Right.
you're jamming with a drummer and a keyboardist. Some
Sure.
people don't think one should do that. In
Right.
my mind, look, whatever I feel is core to the music is
Mm,
melody, rhythm,
mm,
lyric.
mm.
As long as I'm being true to that, I believe that by opening it up a little, maybe we can get more people into the fold. And I don't think there's anything wrong in trying to make it a little cooler in that
Fantastic.
sense.
Fantastic. You today are qualified enough to be in any mainstream mid to senior level corporate job, and and you are here because you chose to go through a rigorous MBA at IIM Bangalore. What was the thinking around that? Why did a very successful performing musician want an MBA, that too from a tier one business school?
So yeah, the most rigorous part of IIM, as you probably know, is getting in, and
Right.
then after that, you get
Yeah.
a healthy dose of academic rigor, as well as
Yeah.
different types of activities that you do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my thinking was, I just finished my engineering, like
Mhm.
every South Indian kid, and the
Mhm.
choices are engineering and medicine. And for me, I've always been academically inclined, so I had never thought of getting into music completely up to then. Now, after my engineering, actually, there came a point where I was thinking about becoming a full-time, just a performing musician.
Right.
But I've always felt that there are many different sides to my personality, and that
Mhm.
one should try and nurture all these sides. The more experiences that you have in life, the better it is. And one of the things that I had perhaps read and heard about the entire MBA program is that it kind of equips you with skills which are perhaps applicable to many domains in life,
Right.
as opposed to purely technical subject where you
Mhm.
have to be in that subject to make use of it. When
Right.
it comes to something like an MBA, the skills that you learn, be it in terms of just breaking down a problem and analyzing it, your communication abilities, your ability to present, there are so many different skills that I think an MBA, not to mention the brand name, which has stuck with me. So I think it was perhaps not a very rational decision, but just a sense that this is going to be something that's going to add to my life and my learning.
So when you were in class in IMB, you must have been a very, very unique person in that class, because, I've been in that class and I know that it's usually filled with, you know, engineers, IITians, the odd, eco grad from a Delhi college and people like that. You must have been really the only performing artist in that class. Now, did that help you bring in like some really unique perspectives into some of the things that were discussed in class, you think?
Mm, Perhaps in some of the classes, yes, I did bring a unique perspective that was different from, say, the corporate world or the academic world. More than adding to the class, I think it sort of gave me, myself, a unique perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I would be perhaps a little more creative in terms of my presentations,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yeah,
try to bring in a little color, find ways to hook the audience right in the beginning. These are all skills from the performing world. Try
right.
to try to understand your audience before you present
And which
to
is what
them.
every marketer is told as well. Understand your audience
Right.
before you take your product out. Yeah,
So I see this as a two-way street. So the musician in me
it's a
has
great
taught the
point.
manager in me a lot, and the manager in me has taught the musician in me a lot.
Right,
To extend it further beyond myself, I think the worlds of music and management have a lot to offer each other. See,
right.
I do these workshops on called Create, Communicate, Collaborate,
Mm-hmm.
where I take managers through the mind of an artist. See, at the end of the day, we are all trying to create something within a set of given constraints.
Right,
In your manager's case, it's probably budget and timeline, and in an artist's case, it's it could be an availability of a group of artists or whatever when the performance is coming up. So in some ways, I do see some synergies between what we are all trying to do, and it's just that I think artists have no choice but to be creative every single day.
right.
And I think that's a perspective that I like to bring into the management world, which is
Sure,
that you don't sit under a tree and think, okay, today I'm going to be creative.
sure, sure.
Creativity is a muscle that you
Right,
need to work at every single day, so
right,
that you get better at it. And
right.
I think that's really what these two worlds have to offer each other. Certainly, I think it's been great for me to have seen these two very different worlds.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, having chosen to do this, having passed the tough hurdle, like you said, of getting in and being in IMB, the logical endpoint of that process for everyone is placements, right? And placement fever hits campus, and people are trying to bag jobs and so on. And you did have a very good offer, I'm told, which you consciously turned down.
So yes, I did my summer internship on Wall Street in New York because, again, it was very coveted thing to do, and I think I did enjoy the whole finance aspect of it. Again, I learned a lot there in those couple of months. Attention to detail. I think that was probably the biggest learning that I had, and just you are having to give everything to the job, put
Right,
everything on the line.
right,
Now, I remember I turned 25 at that time when I was in New York, and it was midnight, and I was in the 85th floor of this really tall building, looking out at what looked like a scene from a Karan Johar movie, but I wasn't really doing what I loved.
right,
I was I would have been happier, singing to a sabha of 250 people singing Ragam Tanam Pallavi. It may not have been thousands of people or anything, or
right.
I may not have been earning lakhs or crores of rupees, but
Mm,
to me, that was what I was giving up
right.
for the sake of this life.
Mm,
And at some point, I said, "No, this is not the life that I want to lead." I had a
right,
taste of it. I felt this was really not for me. And what complicated things, as more often than not, is the personal angle to it, personal
mm,
life. I met the
mm.
man who was going to be my husband during this 2 month stint in New York. And
Fantastic.
so I left New York with two proposals in my hand, right? One for the permanent job and one for marriage. And
Fantastic.
I rejected one, the
Right.
pre-placement offer from
Which
Goldman
is clearly
Sachs.
the job one, yeah.
Yeah, and the other one I accepted with the condition that I would continue to be in India because I was
Mm,
still wanted to learn more. I wanted to be in this milieu,
sure,
and this was where my network was, and I wanted to
sure.
grow as a musician. Maybe contrary to what the normal path would be, I actually got my husband to move back and build a career here.
Terrific.
So I think, yeah, for me it was just very simple. It
Mm,
was, at the end of my life, or when I look at it in retrospect, there are certain things that one would regret.
Mm.
And if I had not taken the choice of being a musician, being involved with the arts, I would have surely regretted it. Whereas the other way around, I don't think the regret is as high.
So that brings me to your other involvement with music. You've been a performer, but also over the last few years, you've played this remarkable role as the director of IME. So tell us the entire story behind it. How did it come about, and what is IME looking to achieve really?
During my MBA, I won what is called the Rotary Brigade Young Achievers Award. And during my speech, I very grandly said, some years later, I want to build an IIM, an Indian Institute of Music.
Okay.
Not even bothering to think whether it made any sense. I was not even giving any thought to it.
Sure.
But the universe has its way of manifesting
Right.
in strange ways. And a few years later, I got a call from the founder of our museum, Jai Shankar, who is the chairman of the brigade group. And he said, look, I have this land and I'm also interested in music. And do you remember you said that now I'm going to hold you to your word, and I want you to head this project that we are setting up. We don't know what we are going to build, but think of it maybe a space for music, and we'll take it from there. So this was, I guess, too good an offer to give up, the idea of setting up an institution around music. This was about 10 years ago. So I quit my banking job that I was doing in Bangalore and jumped aboard. And while we did a lot of research in terms of the kind of institution that we could build, we then chanced upon what is now called the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. It was then known as the Experience Music Project. And this was very unique because it was a museum, but not the museum in the sense of you and I having visited when we grew up, a repository of objects. It wasn't that. It was a very interactive, fun-filled space that really exposed people to creativity and innovation through music. And so with this very nebulous idea that, we should set up something like this for Indian music. India, every city, every town, every village, every language, every religion has its own music. There's so much diversity. And yet what we are exposed to is a very small percentage of it. It's either, Hindi film music or, a little bit of a contemporary stuff that's coming out. Maybe if our families are into classical, we'll be exposed to that one. But there's so much more diversity out there. And how do you get all this together? How do you create this one home of Indian music? So that was the idea really. And over the past 10 years, now we have built what is today called the Indian Music Experience Museum, which is India's first interactive music museum. It's of course located in Bangalore in JP Nagar. It was built at the cost of nearly 50 crores. And the vision of the museum is really to introduce everybody, but especially young people, to the diversity of music from the traditional to the contemporary. So the museum has exhibit galleries, it has a sound garden, it has a learning center, it has various performance spaces, and really a whole roster of activities that we do to really bring more people into the fold and get them to experience the magic that is music.
Right. And you also have a collection of some pretty interesting, rare, very, very iconic exhibits in that in the museum. What's your favorite part of the museum, or what's your favorite object in the museum?
So there are many, and some of them are because of the stories connected to it. For example, you're right, we are one of the few institutions in the country that is preserving the memorabilia and musical instruments belonging to legendary musicians. So I remember when Bismillah Khan Saab's family came and gave his Shehnai to us, there were tears on all sides because they said, we are giving up a part of our soul to you and take care of it. It's like my baby. And it's such a big responsibility. And of course, we've housed it in the museum. My favorite part, though, which never fails to bring a tear to my eye, is this gallery called Songs of Struggle. And many of us may not realize it, but music has played such an important role in the formation of our national identity. And how Gandhiji took a song like Raghupati Raghava Rajaram or Vaishnava Janato, and really it transcended religion to become something that brought, crores of Indians together towards a common cause. And that's what music can do. It's not just entertainment. It's so much more than that. It defines who we are in some way, and it can bring people together. So I think that part for me, when I see those lyrics of those compositions or hear them rendered in the voice of great musicians, it never fails to move me.
Fantastic. Okay. I want to ask you one last question, actually something that I meant to ask you earlier, but I think a very relevant question for a lot of us and a lot of youngsters probably watching this show as well. is that as a musician and as a performer, you're constantly being assessed, and you're being written about. There are reviews, a lot of them I'm sure positive, but you must be getting your share of not so positive feedback
Of
as well,
course.
negative feedback as well. uh, you've given your heart and your soul into a performance, you come back, and then let's say next day in the paper you read a not so complimentary version about what you performed. How do you take that, and how do you absorb that, and how do you move on from that?
I think it's tough. It's not easy. And certainly, of course, in the newspaper, and now even more so than that is social media,
Right,
right?
right.
Where you think
Instantaneous, yeah.
you've sung something well, or you've done a live, and as you're singing, people are
Yeah,
writing comments about
yeah,
you. Some
yeah,
of them will not be positive.
yeah.
So I think the key is really to be very real, and to have a very good understanding of your own self,
Right.
to know where you stand. It's very important to know how good or how bad you are, what are your own areas of improvement.
Mm.
And I think after a while, that sense comes only from introspection.
Right,
It doesn't matter what people say. Some
right.
days, people will say you didn't sing well, but I will find something that I did better than in my last performance.
Mm.
Or some days people will be going gaga, mainly because you sang what they liked or something like
Right,
that.
right.
But you'll know you've not
Yeah,
done a good job,
yeah,
and these were the points that I didn't do well at.
yeah.
So I think the key is really in introspection.
Mm.
And it really, after a while, shouldn't matter what people say,
Mm.
because you are your own best judge. And
Mm.
as long, and see, for me, music is a never ending journey. I'm very far away from what I want to be as a musician, but I've come a long way.
Right.
But all I'm looking for is progress. They're all in search of singing. Very simple thing, there are 7 notes, and if you there are variations of them, there are 12 notes. You have to get those 12 to align in place every
Right.
single time. It may seem so simple, but it's the
Right.
most difficult thing
Of
in this
course.
whole world, and we're all on that journey.
Right.
And be kind to myself, and that's where I think the manager in me also,
Mm.
for example, my husband and I talk about this. He's a manager as well, and he says, you musicians also need to treat it like another day in the office.
Mm.
You don't come home and cry your lungs out if you have a bad day in the office.
Yeah.
It's the same way. Some days are good, some days are bad. Treat it with reverence. Be
Mm.
grateful that you get to do what you
Yeah.
love, because so many
Yeah.
people don't.
Don't.
And I think that's the key.
Terrific, Mansi. So, as one last point, what advice would you give to others who want to follow this path and do what they love, especially performing artists and musicians like yourself?
It's a very personal journey. There are no prescriptions. Do things that you will not regret having not done. And finally, I think it's very important to have a balance between the head and the heart. I'm not someone who says throw caution to the winds and just jump into it, because you have to be real and aware of what the world around is. It's a hyper competitive world in whichever field. So balance it out between your head and your heart. And at the end of the day, I think your intuition will guide you towards the decision that you're meant to take.
Thank you, Mansi. Wonderful words, very, very impactful, and your journey is definitely very, very inspiring.
Thank you.
That was Manasi Prasad taking us through her wonderful, multifaceted journey of being a musician, being a management professional, and being a museum director. Surely this has been an inspiration to all of you out there, especially our young guests who are budding performers in the music or other related fields. Please do keep watching our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter handles for more information and news about upcoming interviews. TRLT, or The Road Less Taken, is a weekly web series, and all our episodes are available on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word around. Stay home, stay safe, and we'll see you soon again on another episode of TRLT. Bye-bye.